Welcome to the program, Inside the Jungle, the Wednesday night roundtable. Yes, I can't reiterate this enough. It is the off season, Bengals fans, and it is officially now the off season because, well, Super Bowl 50 has come and gone. Glad you could join us. I'm Nick Seuberling here alongside Anthony Cosenza and Scott Bantel. We'll talk about the Super Bowl, the commercials, maybe. Did Nick watch the Super Bowl? We'll discuss that all tonight here on the podcast. We'll also ask you if you happen to know where Andy Dalton's luggage is. Maybe we can help Andy Dalton out. We've got some Bengals fans who listen to the podcast in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you can go look for a couple of suitcases near the airport, I think Andy Dalton and J.J. Dalton would very much appreciate it. If you want to get in touch with us, you can. Inside the Jungle at spnt.tv is the email address. And you can also hit us up on Twitter. I am at Nick Seuberling. So let's welcome in my tag team partners tonight. Scott Bantel, the bearded Scott Bantel. Happy Ash Wednesday, my friend.
Yes, happy Ash Wednesday. I must say I didn't quite abide by all the rules. I was a good Catholic for the first 2/3 of the day and then ate my chicken at night. So I'm a terrible Catholic. I can feel myself burning in hell already. So I got that going for me, and the beard, of course.
I did stop at McDonald's today, but I actually went with the filet of fish. I had 2 of them.
Well done. They have the 2 for $4 deal. They normally run a deal.
Is that even actually fish?
Probably not. It's not meat. That's all that matters.
It's probably whatever's left over, like on the deck of the boat that they scrape off and put on your sandwich.
Sea sponge.
I don't know, but it tastes good.
Anthony. They just fry it, put like a gallon of tartar sauce on it, and call it a fillet of fish.
It tasted great going down. That's all I'm going to say. But no, so did you give up anything for Lent?
Yeah, I gave up giving up things. I'm doing very well so far.
All right then. Well,
maybe I'll give up shaving as well. I'm just gonna make life easier.
Well, you're off to a great start, Scott. Well done, sir. All right. Anthony, how are things over on the left coast?
They're all right. I'm kind of fighting off a little bug right now, but otherwise it's going all right.
Did you enjoy the Super Bowl?
It was okay. It was okay. You know, it was kind of an entertaining game, I guess, for a couple of quarters. It was really the first postseason game I significantly watched since the Bengals playoff loss. But yeah, I mean, it was okay. I got to spend the day mostly with family, and then I saw a couple friends at night, and then so I got a little enjoyment out of that.
The highlight of my Super Bowl night, and as I said on the program last week, I wasn't going to watch it, and guess what? I did not watch it. The highlight of my night, though, was going to the local establishment to pick up our pizza, and while I was waiting there, the lady behind the counter said, "Hey, we've got an extra large pizza here. Do you want it?" Cha-ching! Jackpot, baby! So I crushed another large pizza. That's right. I crushed a large pizza all by myself. So I enjoyed the Super Bowl just in a different way, guys.
Anthony, I picture Nick sitting in a corner, just like facing the corner, sulking all night long, yelling at the kids for anything they do. Complaining about them making too much noise while watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And mumbling something under his breath about the Bengals not being there.
You're actually not that far off.
I was gonna say Father of the Year material right there.
Right. So my wife and my kids were watching the game in our family room, and then I was sitting in our dining room in the other room eating the pizza all by myself. So you weren't far off, Scott. And my wife, she asked me, she's like, "Why are you doing this?" I said, I can't support an NFL that's greedy and that doesn't involve the Bengals in the Super Bowl. So once the Bengals were eliminated, I have not watched a minute of football. I absolutely promise you that. So that's just my feelings towards it. I feel like I've watched enough football for 17 freaking weeks, 18 weeks that I'm just kind of footballed out at this point. So to me, it's just one game, and I don't know. I just felt like I had no rooting interest. I didn't care if Peyton Manning won another Super Bowl. I didn't care if the Panthers won. So I had other things that I could be doing, like my taxes. And this seat you
Man,
see me in right now, if you're watching this live, is exactly where I sat during the Super Bowl.
he's doing his taxes during the Super Bowl, yelling at all the neighbor kids when their football comes into his yard.
Get off my lawn!
That's right. Get off my lawn and my snow.
Yeah, so that's just my take. So, all right, Scott, what about you? Did you enjoy the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good game in the sense that for the first 55 minutes, it was a close game. Um, if you enjoy defense, it was entertaining. I like a little more scoring. I would have liked to see some more exciting plays. So from an entertainment standpoint, I can't say it was the most entertaining game. Uh, but it wasn't it wasn't a blowout. The final score was indicative of a blowout, but it really wasn't. It was a close game. So that's really all I asked for in a Super Bowl is a good game that keeps my interest in, and it did. Um, like I said, it wasn't it wasn't nearly as exciting as last year's game. It was far more exciting than the previous year's game, which was over after the first 10 minutes. So, um, it was good. The Panthers lost. I was kind of rooting for Peyton, so I was happy.
Yeah, I guess I was pretty incorrect. I thought the Broncos would lose big, that the Panthers would show up, and boy, was I wrong. And it's funny. I was talking with a coworker at work this week about the Panthers, and you look back on their season, guys, and I can't recall them ever facing a top-notch, legitimate defense. And for the first time, they faced one, and it showed, right, Anthony? I mean, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I'd need to look at their schedule to really see
Well, just look at the NFC South for one.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, obviously that's what springs to mind immediately. And you look at the defenses there, and there's no real world beaters in that division. So yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, you're definitely correct. I would say at least most of their schedule, if not all of it, like you said, probably didn't feature a lot of strong defenses. And I think they faced a pretty good one in Arizona in the playoffs. Um, but other than that, I mean, and I'm writing kind of a post on this, but I think, and I touched on another post actually, but I think you are really beginning to see a, reestablishment of the idea of defense really still being a major part to a team running to the Super Bowl and through the Super Bowl. Both of the teams that were featured, I mean, Carolina went up against a good defense, a great defense in Denver, but Carolina put one out on the field themselves too. I mean, they had a great defense. I think I counted there was, like 12 sacks and six total turnovers combined between the teams. So, I mean, the defenses were flying around making all kinds of plays in this game for both teams. And the Bengals, if we're going to kind of spin it in that direction a little bit, the Bengals have a pretty good defense themselves, but I think you're seeing a premium on always having good edge players, always having good pass rushers, always having enough of them, even behind your starters, just so no matter how good of a quarterback you're facing, you always have a chance in the game because you can consistently get to the passer. And I think both of those teams showed that formula being effective not only in the Super Bowl itself, but their run to it.
So did Peyton Manning actually play well in this game, guys?
No.
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 But he didn't cost them the game either.
Right.
He played okay enough to win.
He was. It's weird to say for Peyton Manning, but he was a game manager. He kind of did the dink and dunk stuff. There weren't too many deep passes that were given to him in the play calls. There was a lot of bubble screens and short yards after the catch type of plays, but he still had two turnovers. He got sacked and fumbled one away, and then threw a pretty poor interception. So he didn't play well. He played well enough to win, I guess. But I think for the first time, and I think that's kind of what the narrative has been this week, for the first time, Peyton Manning finally had a true team to lean on in a quest for a Super Bowl, as opposed to the team, a weaker overall roster having to basically live and die by his arm and his football mind. So, he kind of got a little break for this last one, I guess, as opposed to other years.
Do you have anything to add to that, Scott?
No, and I think it goes to show um, how overrated the quarterback Super Bowl win stat is. I look at it a lot like wins of a pitcher in baseball. You could have 20 wins and have a 4.5 ERA if you got a great offense.
Yeah.
You could, you know, have a 2.0 ERA and only have 10 wins if you play for the Reds. So, this was a situation where Peyton Manning's going to get credit. He won. Like Anthony said, he played well enough not to lose, I guess. Um, he'll go down in history now with two Super Bowls, but he was not the reason they won that game. So, but no one's going to remember that. They'll look back and say he was 2-2 in Super Bowls. He's got two Super Bowl rings, and that's just about as far as people look at those things.
And he's halfway to Brady, and he's just now tying his brother.
Yeah, I mean, and if we want to tie this to the Bengals, I kind of get a kick out of it. It really depends on the quarterback. When it comes to what the media story is going to be. With Peyton, it's going to be, man, he was a good game manager. He was the sheriff. He took what the defense gave him, didn't make any big mistakes. If it was Andy Dalton, it would be the Bengals won in spite of Dalton being terrible. I mean, it really is it's the story the media wants to tell, and that's the story they wanted to tell with Peyton, so they got that chance.
All right, so I'm going to ask this question because a lot of the feedback I got on Monday morning after the game was a lot of Bengals fans' disappointment because they felt, A, they should have been in this game and that they could have easily won this Super Bowl. So after watching the Broncos the way they played on Sunday and their run through the playoffs, do you think that the Bengals are in the picture, or are Bengals fans kind of living in a pipe dream and that we're still talking about the 0-7 playoff record of Marvin Lewis Bengals?
Anthony, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I guess you're talking about if they got past Pittsburgh, would they have made the run, especially if they had Andy Dalton, that sort of thing?
I mean, do you honestly feel like the Bengals are that close to winning a Super Bowl?
I think this year, had they had Andy Dalton healthy, I think they would have been in that picture. I think they would have gotten past that first game against the Steelers. I still think a lot of people think that could have been a blowout with Dalton at the helm, but I don't see that. I just think that's going to be a tough win regardless. But I think Dalton makes maybe just a few more plays earlier in the game to get them a few more points than McCarron was able to. But
what makes you believe that, though, Anthony?
Well,
just curious. I mean, I'm not trying to be stir the pot here. I just want to know.
The first three quarters of play, I mean, if you noticed, A.J. McCarron, for the great work he did in the fourth quarter against Pittsburgh,
yeah,
he played three pretty terrible quarters of football, and it wasn't just not moving the ball. I mean, he threw a wobbly interception that was a terrible pass that led to Pittsburgh points. He fumbled the ball, I think, 3 different times, losing one of them. So I mean, there was a lot of mistakes. And granted, the weather was terrible, and there's obviously some jitters. It was, he's a young quarterback, so that's going to happen. But I think Dalton probably would have got them some more points earlier in the game instead of being down. Where were they down 15-0? I think at one point. So I think Dalton gets them in a little bit better position earlier in the game to be able to hang on and win that game. Probably get maybe another field goal at the end of the game too. I don't know. I think that's kind of the consensus opinion. They would obviously have a better chance to win with their starting quarterback in the lineup. But aside from that, I'm still of the mindset that both teams got so beat up in that game, and I think the Bengals.
Like John.
Yeah, both teams got so beat up in that game that the Bengals had a number of guys leave the game. I mean, you have Reggie Nelson that wasn't even able to play in the Pro Bowl a couple weeks later. I just think that team being so injured and knocked around by the Steelers, even if they were to advance, even with Andy Dalton going to Denver, facing that pass rush, I'm sorry, they would have gone to New England, excuse me. But going in that hostile environment itself and playing Tom Brady and that whole crew, I think that might have been a little too much to ask after such an emotionally charged game that they had against Pittsburgh. I don't think I think this year they probably, just because of the matchup, they probably would have had one game and then been out. but that's my take.
Well, I mean, these are all hypothetical what ifs. I think I agree with Anthony with the way they were beat up after that game. I'm not sure they could have beaten anyone the next week. I mean, it sounds like Dalton still hasn't thrown. We found that out today, so he probably wouldn't have been back. Giovanni Bernard wouldn't have been back. So I don't think with what they would have been missing, I'm not sure they could have gone to New England and won. Hypothetically, though, if they were healthy, if or at least if Dalton was playing, I think they could have beaten either one of those teams. Now, I don't think it would have been an easy victory, but the Broncos were terrorizing Cam Newton all day long. And you take a look at when the Bengals went out and played in Denver, not a neutral site, but in Denver, they only surrendered 2 sacks, and that was in a overtime extended game. So, they nearly beat the Super Bowl champions on the road with a backup quarterback. So, that's pretty impressive. So I think, I definitely think the Bengals with Andy Dalton were good enough to beat any team in the AFC this year, and I think they were good enough to beat any team in the NFC this year. Would they have? We're talking about a coach that has an 0-7 playoff record, so I'm not sure that would happen. But I certainly think that they are on par with these teams as far as talent goes and ability. It's just, are they able to do it when the lights come on? And I'm not sure they can.
Well, I mean, I guess your saving grace here, guys, is that if Gary Kubiak can win a Super Bowl, maybe Marvin Lewis can win a Super Bowl. Do you have any hope after seeing that?
I was asking this after the game. Do you think Gary Kubiak now becomes the worst head coach to ever have won a Super Bowl?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Brian Billick's up there.
I don't know. I mean, Gary Kubiak's been a terrible coach until he had Peyton Manning. I know Manning didn't play great, but I'll be interested to see what he does next year when Brock Osweiler's the quarterback all year long.
Oh, if he is, because he's a free agent, so he might.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
In terms of Kubiak, yeah, I mean, I was kind of blanking there for a second because I was going through the memory banks of coaches that could kind of be tabbed as the worst coach to win a Super Bowl. It's kind of hard to think of one on the spot here, but it gives a little bit of hope in terms of Marvin Lewis getting over that hump. But you just got to wonder. I mean, what's it going to take? I mean, they've had different matchups, they've had different quarterbacks play, they've had different players on the roster, and none of it seems to be working. And there's one constant in the 0-7 record, and it's Marvin Lewis. And I don't know. And the other thing about the 0-7 record is the ways they find to lose. It's pretty incredible. Last game against the Steelers, that was pretty incredible. Obviously, they got blown out against teams you thought they probably shouldn't have been blown out by, and obviously the heartbreaker with Carson Palmer. But I don't know. It's such a difficult thing, and it's kind of that fine line to walk. Do you stick with the devil and stick with the continuity, even though there's good results but not great ones, or do you roll the dice and maybe try and get a chance to a young up and comer and give them the reins to the team and see what they can do with it? I don't know. I'm personally, I think it's probably time to move on, but he's got one more year on his deal now, Lewis does, and if he's got probably still a very good roster to work with this year. So if he can't do it this year, then I would be very hard pressed to find a reasoning as to why he should stick around beyond this year.
I find myself, unfortunately for me, I'm at work and I'm operating machinery and I'm listening to podcasts, or sometimes I'm listening to music. And over the last 3 weeks, ever since the Bengals have been eliminated, I keep coming back to this thought in my head that I'm always hearing about how talented this Bengals roster is, and it's one of the best rosters in the NFL, and that I just feel like this team is vastly underachieving for the amount of talent that's on the roster. It's almost like the coaching staff's not getting enough out of them. That they're leaving so much on the table here that they should be doing more than what they're doing. And I keep coming back to the thought in my head of, well, okay, who is that guy out there that's going to maximize the potential on this roster? And I'm still drawing a blank. I don't know who that answer is.
Well, I hate to sound like a Marvin apologist because I'm certainly not, but in this situation, I am going to defend him a bit because with Dalton, he's now 0-5. The first 2 years, I think it was more of a pleasant surprise that they made it to the playoffs. I wouldn't say that it's fair to have expected either of those teams to win. Yes, they did play T.J. Yates, but you got a rookie Dalton going up against what was, I believe, the best defense in the league at that time in the Texans on the road. So I can't really say that I feel that either one of those teams should have won. The one that hurts was the home game against San Diego. That one they should have won. That one was not just on Marvin or on Dalton. That was also on the defense's terrible effort.
Everybody involved, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like excuses, but last year, could they have won? Maybe, but look who he was throwing to. I mean, Greg Little was his number 2 receiver. Mohamed Sanu was the number 1. I say
Rex Burkhead was your 3rd receiver.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I say it tongue in cheek, but literally, I mean, would they have been missing out on much if the 3 of us were running routes? I mean, those guys weren't open. We wouldn't have been open either. So, and this year, it's so hard to win with a backup quarterback in the regular season, let alone the postseason. They're going up against a very good Pittsburgh team with what was essentially a rookie quarterback. I mean, he's making his 4th NFL start, or 5th NFL start, I should say. Hadn't thrown a pass at all last year, so I mean, it's really a rookie quarterback. So to expect him to win with a rookie quarterback, and that would have been a huge upset. I think the Steelers were favored by about 5 on the road, so it certainly would have been huge for the Bengals to win. But again, it sounds like I'm making excuses for him, but these are just facts. I mean, you can't legitimately expect a team that went to Indy last year to win as injured as they were, and you can't really expect a team without your quarterback to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, like I said, I hate giving them a pass, but I almost have to.
There are a couple of years in there that I feel that a run should have been made, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, 05, obviously, but then you look at exactly what Scott was talking about in the bad luck aspect. Second snap of the game that the Bengals take on offense, Carson Palmer blows his knee out. So, okay, 09, that was kind of a surprise. Yeah, they swept the division, and they got what seemed like a lesser Jets draw in the playoffs. But, that team kind of had its flaws. It wasn't the strongest team all around. But then you look at, 11, obviously Dalton, the rookie. I look at 12 where the team grew, you had a better roster, and you're playing the same exact team in the same exact scenario, and you can't get over the hump there. I felt 12 was a good year for them to at least get a playoff win, maybe 2, and then grow and learn from that. I definitely feel 13 was probably one of their biggest drops of the ball, so to speak, in the playoffs. That's the loss to the Chargers was inexcusable, especially in the lopsided fashion that it happened. It's inexcusable. 14, the injuries, as Scott mentioned, I would give a pass. But this year, too, even with McCarron at helm, they had that game won. I mean, they had it with all of the issues they had. With very little time left in that game, they had it won. I feel like there's a handful of years in there that a run could have and should have been made, and it wasn't. And there's been some bad luck, but there's been some awful coaching. And I look at that Chargers game especially, and when you have Charger players coming out after that loss saying that they didn't see anything different than what the Bengals showed them a month ago, that's terrible coaching. And to your question, Nick, about who else is out there, I mean, I don't know. I don't work in the NFL, so I can't properly identify certain coaching talents, but I think, there's a lot of talk of Vance Joseph. Maybe if he shows promise as a defensive coordinator, now that he's left, there are a lot of players on this Bengals team that said he's the best coach they have ever played for at any level. So, he's been a hot commodity. The Bengals hung on to him last year after he had a chance to go elsewhere. because they valued him. Maybe he's a guy that in the next year or two rises and kind of becomes one of those hot names. I don't know. But there are guys out there, and I think we've kind of talked about it when we talk about free agency in this team. They've been burned so many times by coaching changes and, in the 90s, player turnover and bad draft picks. They feel that they've got something really good in Marvin Lewis and something steady, and they've built continuity there, that they don't want to lose that and revert back. But that sometimes these guys can only take you so far, and you got to be willing to take a risk to get to that next level. And they might be looking to do that after this last year of Lewis's contract if the result's the same or even worse.
I guess what I remember so vividly was that Tampa Bay team that was always getting to that championship game in the NFC Championship game, and Tony Dungy could not win the game. They couldn't get over that hump, and they fired him. And then the next year, what does John Gruden do? He goes and wins the Super Bowl with the same exact players. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, 0-7 tells me a lot. I'm not entirely sure he's ever going to get over that hump in Cincinnati. So I'm just thinking, is there a coach out there that can take this team to a level it's never been before? And yes, it was great they went 8-0 this year, and yeah, it was great they finished 12-4 for the second time in the history of the franchise. But in the end, it means absolutely nothing, because here we are at the beginning of February, where we're asking the same questions that we've asked the same previous 5 years.
Right, and then it comes down to, again, when you're making a coaching change, it's either you take a chance on a relatively or totally unproven guy at head coach, you go into the college ranks and you maybe try and grab one of those successful guys from there, or you kind of go through the recycling heap of all the old veteran coaches that are out there, like a Tom Coughlin or whoever else, Mike Shanahan, and you go, okay, well, Tom Coughlin has 2 Super Bowl rings to his name, sure, but his teams outside of those 2 years have largely been disappointing, at least with the Giants, I should say. Mike Shanahan, couple nice years in Denver. Obviously, he's got a couple rings, but other than that, he hasn't done something to prove himself for quite some time either. So, again, there's kind of risk associated whichever route they take. Be it the unproven, be it the college ranks, or kind of going in that recycle bin, if you will, and grabbing one of these guys. But 0-7 speaks pretty loud volumes, like you said, Nick. And if if he goes 0-8, I don't know what else it would take for the team to make a move at head coach. I mean, I think 0-8 would be a pretty even more substantial sample size to say we got to do something different.
Yeah, 15 years in, he's got as many playoff wins as the three of us. I'd like to think that just by sheer dumb luck that one of us could have coached the team to victory in one of those 7 tries.
Well, I remember when they were interviewing Marvin Lewis for the job, Tom Coughlin was one of those names that they were interviewing, and they were pretty high on. And what has he done? He went and won 2 Super Bowls in New York. And you just got to wonder, like, would that have happened if Tom Coughlin were here? I don't know, but it's just the just bad dumb luck of this franchise that's where we sit.
Well, I just think leadership is still quite questionable at best. I think there's been a lot of improvements over the years in the front office, and they've done some nice things, but I still think it's antiquated compared to some of the way they operate is antiquated in comparison to other NFL franchises. I still think their scouting staff, even though they've beefed that up lately, it's still small by comparison to other staffs. They have their coaches running around and doing I mean, coaches should be involved in scouting, obviously, and looking at players, but they have them do likely more of that than most other NFL franchises do. And I know we all kind of have our differing opinions on free agency and things like that, but there is still a constant surplus of money that could be spent potentially to help this team every year. And whether it's, again, re-signing some of the guys that were maybe set to hit free agency this offseason, and that way there's not such a big surplus and you're not facing 14 or 15 expiring contracts to some very important players all at one time, or getting some role players, an additional starter, or whatever in free agency to help your team out. So I just think the way they operate is still, even though they've improved things, I still think it's not totally up to snuff with other teams, and I think that trickles down in throughout the entire organization. And I think they're allowing Marvin Lewis and his 0-7 record to still be the head football coach of this team, and they accept that.
Yeah, I guess I I don't know. I'm frustrated with the fact that we're 0-7 in the playoffs, and I'm frustrated that I'm still baffled at the way that that game was lost to the Steelers this year. And you're right, it comes down to leadership and big game mentality. And it's not just the playoffs. I mean, even his primetime games, which are quote unquote big games, he doesn't have a great track record. And so that thought continues to process in my mind while I'm doing meaningless tasks. Is this team where it should be coaching wise? And so that's why I asked that question. And so when Bengals fans tell me, "Oh, we could have won that Super Bowl," I'm like, I don't know what team you're watching, because I don't think they're all that close. They might have a good roster, but I personally don't think they're close to winning a Super Bowl. That's just my take. Would love to hear your thoughts, though, Bengals fans. Inside the Jungle at spnt.tv is the email address. Love your feedback. Do you think the Bengals are close to winning a Super Bowl? Let us know and send us your emails. We've got some good news. We've got a breaking news update. Apparently Andy Dalton's luggage was found. I don't know how he happened to lose his luggage on the way to the airport today. I guess he was heading to Mexico. But, yeah, that's got to suck. Can you imagine parking in your parking space and seeing that your tailgate is down and your luggage is missing?
This concerns me, Nick. This concerns me maybe slightly more than his thumb injury. This is just pure common sense issues here. This is decision making. Who the hell puts their luggage in the bed of their truck without either the bed up or the tailgate up, or without a tailgate on? I mean, I'm concerned about this guy's decision making now running the offense. This is really concerning to me, much more than a thumb.
It's hard to argue, Anthony, right? I mean, it's baffling.
Well, we need a Dalton apologist on the panel, because I haven't always been the most ardent Dalton backer. So
I know I am, but I can't defend him. I can't defend a man that puts luggage in the bed of his truck with the tailgate down.
Maybe it was faulty engineering on the truck's part, and that's what we'll say.
I got to imagine that truck's got a cab, an extended cab, right behind them. I mean, they've got a child. Not that you would be putting a child back there. Why couldn't you put it inside the actual truck of the cab rather than the tailgate? You're going to Mexico. It's not like you're packing a lot anyway.
Well, I don't have kids, but from what I understand, packing with having kids and when you're going on vacation requires a lot of extra stuff. So
true.
Right. And if Andy's wife, who seems like a very sweet gal, but if Andy's wife is one of those ladies that loves to bring 48 million pieces of luggage with her on vacation as well, they might have just had some overflow, you know. Now I'm being the Dalton backer. I'm making excuses for him, you know.
All right. Well, the good news is apparently this is from our very own Rebecca Toback. She put it in our chat room earlier that the luggage has been found. I don't have a source, but I know you were all very concerned.
I saw it on his social media actually shortly before we came on. I think he said somebody found it and returned it to him.
Oh, good for them. Lucky dude he is, no question about it. All right, so it's time now to make some announcements regarding the podcast, and usually we do this every year. Try to change things up and try to refresh the podcast. We've been doing this now for this is our 232nd episode, and if you listen to the first episode, it sounds nothing like what episode 232 is. There's no question about it. And we've gone through changes and the show has evolved into different things. And I feel like in 2015, especially during the fall, we kind of lost our way a little bit. Um, I think the show kind of got out of hand with the callers, and that's my fault. And I got a lot of feedback of late about the callers and people not being people basically turning the podcast off after we open up the phone lines, which to me was kind of eye-opening. And I want people to have a voice. I want people to have a say. But at the same time, I also want them to enjoy the listening experience. I want you to listen to this podcast. I want you to download it and tell your friends to download the podcast. And we were getting to a point where the show was an hour and a half long. To me, that's way too long for a podcast. There are some podcasts that are that long, but for me personally, producing the show and doing this each and every week, I just felt like the show was getting a little too long. Part of that was due to the phone calls. So for the time being, we're gonna scrap the phone calls. We're still gonna do the show live every Wednesday night here at 9 o'clock Eastern at cincyjungle.com, but we're going to kind of take a break from the phone call portion of the show. We may, kind of like Anthony suggested this when we had our meeting last week. You wanna fill people in on your thoughts on the phone calls, and maybe having it more like a mailbag type situation?
Yeah, we talked about a variety of different things, and I think we all agree that the podcast is in a good spot. We're getting still a lot of downloads and a lot of listeners, which is awesome. But I think the length was a little bit of an issue, but we also were concerned that there's also going to be a demographic that tunes into this show because they can call in and they can talk to us, ask us questions, whatever the case may be, and we have some great people that do that. So maybe we add an additional show. So maybe we shorten this one, shorten the main kind of roundtable show to a 30 to 45 minute type of deal, and then maybe we do an additional 20 to 30 minute episode that's pure phone calls, or maybe we just if we end up doing the post game thing again, Nick, maybe maybe that one's just pure phone calls again. But maybe what we do is we still have the weekly roundtable, but maybe once every few weeks, once a month, once every couple weeks, whatever the case is, we just add in an additional 20 to 30 minute show, either earlier in the week or whatever, and it's basically a soundboard for callers, and we just take calls and we answer questions, we let people vent, whatever the case may be, and do that route, and that way we kind of appease everybody, the people that kind of just want the roundtable portion and for whatever reason just want to listen to us, get that, and the people that love calling in and talking to us that we also love too. It's not that we don't love the phone calls, just the podcast was getting a little lengthy, and I think we all kind of wanted to switch that up a little bit, so maybe we chop that up.
Yeah, and again, like Anthony said, I don't want to get rid of the phone calls, and the podcast is about the fans of the Bengals. It's about fans and it's about the community of growing together around the show. And I love hearing from Bengals fans all around the world. Trust me, I really do. But it comes to a point where the show it was affecting the show in a negative way, and so Scott and Anthony and I, we had a powwow last week after the show. We kind of discussed things to try and make it better. And one of the ways we're going to do that is for the time being, we're going to eliminate calls. And maybe once 1 week per month during the off season, we'll open up the phone lines and let people chime in. Maybe when we get closer to the draft or when free agency opens, that sort of thing. Maybe we'll open up those phone lines. But in the meantime, we're going to focus on creating a better listening experience. Scott, you recommended 30 to 40 minutes tops each and every week.
Yeah, and I think I wasn't part of the show when it started, but the original idea was a 30 to 40 minute show, and the idea was it's easier for our listeners to consume. They can consume it either on their commute to or from work, maybe split both ways, or maybe over their lunch break. And we kind of all felt like because of the length that it was getting to, it wasn't as easy to consume for our listeners. As a listener of podcasts myself, most of the things I listen to are in the 30 to 40 minute range anyways. Beyond that, it's kind of too lengthy. It's harder to listen to. So we hate cutting out the phone calls because we love taking them, but we think in the long run it's going to end up being better for the listeners, and everyone's going to be able to consume it easier, because it will be something that can be listened to in your commute to or from work.
Yeah, well said, Scott. And we'll still take emails, and if we get a good email, there's no question we'll read it on the air and we'll we'll bring it up. So yeah, you can always do that. Um, I want to get back to where the show was when we first started. 30 to 40 minutes, just jam pack it with content talking about the Bengals, and we'll still do the show Wednesday night. We'll still do it live. We'll still have the chat room, and I think what we're going to explore doing here in the fall with the actual season is, instead of doing a post game show, I think we might do either a Sunday night or a Monday night show where we will take phone calls and we'll recap what happened on Sunday
Yeah.
or Monday. And I think the best part about the phone calls is getting that initial reaction after a Bengals game, where people are fired up, they're angry, or they're happy, excited. The different range of emotions you get after a Bengals game. So we're still going to explore that. We're tweaking the formula a little bit here and the format here on the show, but we're not going anywhere. The show's still going to go on, but we're going to we're making some slight changes. And we've had some people tonight ask about Mickey and where he's been. And for those of you who don't know, and Mickey is actually not part of Cincy Jungle anymore. He's no longer contributing to the website. So we may still have Mickey come on from time to time, but I think right now he's got other priorities going on in his life, and right now he kind of wants to step away, and I totally understand that. So we're going to Anthony, Scott, and I, we're going to carry on the show. We're going to make it the best Bengals podcast out there. There's no question about it. We appreciate everything Mickey's ever done for the show. There's no question, and he's always got an open seat if he wants to hop in. But for the time being, it's going to be the three of us moving forward, and we'll rock it out every week, and we'll bring you the best Bengals coverage, bar none. No question about it. So that's our announcement. Any other feedback, guys, you want to share?
I would say that, and I don't want to speak for you, Nick, but it's not an absolute closed book on these changes and these decisions. I mean, I think we have an idea of the direction we want to go. There's a little bit of bounce back from some people in the chat room talking about how they like the phone calls, and I think there's going to be a way to appease both groups, and I think you're never going to try and please absolutely everybody, but if you do have feedback, definitely hit any of us up and let us know about, hey, this would be something I'd be into or whatever, and we'll take that into consideration. But we think we have a pretty good handle on what we'd like to see and do with the show, and we can maybe do a couple of new things and creative things to kind of appease the regular listeners and also grab some new audience members as well.
And if Chris ever agrees to eat that boot on air, we'll certainly let him come on.
He'll get his own episode. Yeah, he'll get his own episode if he does that.
Right. There's no question about it. And again, it's not that we don't like the phone calls and we don't like the feedback. What we're trying to do is we're trying to experiment and change things up. I felt like the show, especially during the fall, I felt like we were kind of going through the motions, and I could tell that I don't know. I don't know. Again, I go back to the length of the show. An hour and a half to me is just way too long, and I want to get back to having the best 30 to 40-minute podcast possible. And for the time being, that just means we're going to have to eliminate the phone calls, and that's unfortunate. We're doing some experimenting here with the podcast, and like all shows, everybody's got to go through different changes, and we're going to make it better. There's no question about it. So
yeah, and one other thing we talked about, just so the listeners know, one other thing we kicked around as an idea is adding more guests as well, whether it be players, coaches, beat writers, and not have them here for the 30, 40-minute segments we have them, but we've had them in the past, but maybe 10 minutes, you get to hear from a player, a coach, whoever, and I think that adds a little spice to things as well. So we're going to try and see if we can do some of that, a little bit more of that than we've done in the past as well.
Yep, I'm glad you brought that up, AC. Good stuff. So yeah, those are our changes. And if you have questions, you can always email me insidethejungle@spnt.tv. I'd be happy to respond and fill you in on what it is we've got envisioned for the show moving forward. I'm really looking forward to the changes. I think it's going to bring a renewed sense of energy with the podcast too. So it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. So with that, let's quickly wrap up. You got any shout-outs, guys? Scott, start with you.
Well, I'm giving a shout out to my guy Patrick Carlisle in the chat room. We're going back and forth about Tyler Eifert and Travis Kelce. I certainly disagree with him 100%, but I appreciate the passion and the fact that he's in the chat room being so active. So a shout out to Patrick.
Good stuff. Welcome to the chat room, Patrick, and hopefully we'll see you next week. AC, how about you? You got a shout out?
Yeah, I'm going to shout out someone who may not be your favorite person in the world, Nick, but it's USC Athletic Director Pat Hayden.
I don't mind Pat Hayden. He was a good Notre Dame broadcaster, actually.
Yeah, and I read before the show here, he's going through some. I knew he already had some health issues, part of which led to him going to be stepping down from the position. Also, there's a lot of issues that have happened at USC under his watch, but he experienced some more health issues today, and I guess he's got to have some sort of surgery or procedure done to help remedy the situation. So just want to give him a little shout out. Thinking about him, I know USC isn't the favorite school of a lot of people that listen to this show, but he's a good dude. He's a really sharp guy. If you ever have a chance to read up on his background, he's got a pretty incredible background. But yeah, just thoughts with him.
Good stuff, AC. We wish him well. I'm going to give a couple shout-outs. I'm going to give a shout-out to Scott Barber. He's a Bengals fan in West Virginia, and a good trivia dude as well. Scott actually recently was kind enough to purchase an Inside the Jungle t-shirt, so I sent that his way recently. So, Scott, thank you for supporting the show, and thanks for buying the t-shirt. And go Bengals. He's also a big Boston Bruins fan. He's a Boston sports fan, except the only team he doesn't like is the Patriots. He likes the Bengals. Boy, did he make the wrong decision there. No question about it. So that's one shout. The other shout out I'm going to give is to Kyle Howard. He's a senior at Bowling Green State University, and he's the executive producer of a club that I used to belong to, the Bowling Green Radio Sports Organization. Met with him a couple weeks ago and talked to him about what he's going to be doing after he graduates, and he's actually a Bengals fan. And so he's tuned into the podcast lately. And so I'm giving Kyle a shout out. Kyle Howard, you're the man. Keep doing great things down there at Bowling Green, Kyle. Appreciate all that you do. All right, it's time to get out of here. Again, if you want to help support our podcast, you can at Patreon, spnt.tv/Patreon. A little bit helps. $1 a month goes a long way. That's a quarter an episode, basically. Goes a long way in helping the show achieve its goals here in 2016. Thank you for supporting the show for the past, I guess it's been almost 2 years now since we launched that campaign, so thank you for that. Thank you for your support. Thank you for downloading the show. You can download our audio content on demand on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. We've got our own Inside the Jungle app, which you can find at spnt.tv/apps. It's available on iOS and Android. And of course, if you really like our show, you can always leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way as well. We do record the show live every Wednesday at 9 o'clock Eastern right here at cincyjungle.com. So throughout all the changes that we're announcing here in the podcast, you can still count on us being live at 9 o'clock on Wednesday night. So we will see you next Wednesday for another edition of Inside the Jungle. Before we get out of here, my special thanks to our associate producers, Andy Lanham, Larry Rolston, Mike Vardy, Chris Setters, Fado Bayari, Josh Schuster, Saj, Lord Funkington, Jake Jones, and Paul Berzal. Inside the Jungle is an SPNT production. For more information about our other podcasts, log on to spnt.tv. And as always, check out our great Bengals content over at cincyjungle.com. So for AC and Scott, I'm Subes. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday night. Hoo day!